On behalf of the congregation, I'm so happy that you're here tonight for this important conversation. As we begin, I want to introduce to you Congressman Jerrold Nadler. Congressman... As we know, he's our congressman, represents Riverside and much of the Upper West Side, and he's going to say a few words now.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to be very brief so that the time for questioning is maximized. I want to just start by thanking Senator Gillebrand for holding this town hall meeting in my district and where we need it. And I want to thank her for being such a leader in opposing the challenges to democracy and democratic government posed by the current administration. We have seen challenges to the freedom of the press, challenges to the courts, challenges to our regard for each other, challenges to immigration and immigrants, challenges to racial minorities, challenges to the democratic norms that hold this society together. And Kirsten has been a leader in opposing these challenges. We all have to stand up so that we continue to have a democratic and a decent government. And that's all I'll say right now. Thank you very much.
We have several elected officials here tonight, so I want to recognize State Senator Brian Benjamin. Yep. And Assemblymember Deborah Glick. And Linda Rosenthal is here as well. Yes? Wonderful. Wonderful. As I said, I'm Amy Butler. I'm the Senior Minister here at the Riverside Church. We're so happy that you're here. We strive to be a community here on the Upper West Side that is in partnership with everything that's going on in our neighborhood. We have a freedom school going on right now in our building, and it's a wonderful, exciting way to bring the neighborhood in. We believe here in having conversations that matter because we're all part of making our community a better place. And so I'm so very, very happy that the Senator is here with us tonight and in conversation with all of us. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you United States Senator from the great state of New York, Kirsten Gillebrand.
Well, thank you, Reverend, for your introduction and for hosting us. I'm really delighted to be here in this amazing part of our great city, and I appreciate all the work you do every day. I want to recognize and thank the Congressman for being here. Congressman Nadler has been such a champion for so many issues that we all care about. He's an extraordinary leader, and I'm very privileged to work with him in Congress every day. I want to thank our other elected leaders who's sitting here. Thank you for coming. I'm very grateful when our local electeds are able to come because we work on these issues together on the state, local, and federal levels, so I'm really appreciative. And I'm really happy that I'm here in Morningside Heights to have this town hall. One of the greatest things I get to do is travel around our state and talk to folks about the issues that you care about. It's a huge opportunity for me to hear directly from you about what's on your mind, what your concerns are, what you want done in Washington, and what are some of the worries that you and your family have. So it's invaluable to me. There's a couple of issues that I hear about no matter where I go. The first one is the cost of health care, that people believe that the cost of health care is becoming, if it's not already become, absolutely unaffordable for working people in this state. And so that's why I'm for Medicare for all. I believe that health care should be a right and not a privilege. And I'm going to fight for that. I think we need to take on the insurance companies that do not have your health and well-being in mind. They just have profits. I think we need to take on the drug companies that, again, do not have your health and well-being in mind. They focus on profits, and I have a bunch of legislation on how to do that. I also believe that people are really concerned about getting money out of politics. There is so much money in politics right now, and a lot of it's dark money. And when you have dark money in politics that you don't get disclosures for, you don't know who's spending the money, it's corrosive to our actual democracy. And people want to know, what did they buy for that money? And who are you listening to? Are you listening to your constituents or are you listening to your donors? And so the truth is we have to get money out of politics. So we really need to strive for publicly funded elections, and that's something I'm going to work very hard towards. And the last issue that I hear about around the state is just the economy and jobs. People really want to have access to good paying jobs so they can provide for their families. And that comes in all sorts of forms. I want to see more made in America. I want to see more manufacturing here in New York City, throughout New York State. I want to see better job training so that people can actually have the training they need for the jobs that are available, and I want that training to be accessible. And I also want to believe that we should be fighting for full employment, because at the end of the day, anybody who wants to be working full-time should be working full-time and should have whatever training they need to get there. So those are just the highlights of some things that I've heard a lot about, but now let's turn it over to you guys, and I look forward to answering all your questions. Thank you so much. And afterwards, we'll have a photo line, so if you just want to take a picture, I will hang out. Thanks.
This may not be a popular question, and this is an odd place to bring it up, but it has to do with the separation of church and state.
It's a good place to bring it up.
Now, I don't know whether the church has given you and us this space free tonight, or whether you had to pay for it. But that's really not the point. I walk the streets of New York and I see the homeless, 40,000 strong. I think that's the figure, maybe it's gone up. And I walk into, I know I have to ask a question, but I'll just give you a brief, okay, the churches open their doors to musical events from outside of from outside, and to political events and to various and sundry other things. They have wonderful programs for learning and so on, so I'm not denying that. However, and not all structures are as big as this, but there are enough churches and synagogues and mosques in this city that would actually house the homeless, at least at night. And that has been a cry of mine for a great many years. If you can open your doors to fun events and to charitable events, I know you have soup kitchens and things like that, the homeless need not be on the street. I, for one, do not believe we have true separation, because your tax exemption is being supported by the taxpayers' dollars. Anyway, the question is, what will it take to get all religious institutions being supported by the people to open their doors to the homeless who lay cold and wet and helpless on the streets of New York 365 days a year for how many years?
So I can answer that question from the federal government perspective. I can't answer it for the church or the synagogues in our city. I do believe that we owe a duty to one another. I believe that the role of government is to help people. I believe our mission should be to make sure no one is homeless in America. And so that's why I think we should fund affordable housing. We should fund HUD. We should fight this administration when they're wrong about not funding HUD and not funding affordable housing throughout our country. I think housing is a moral right. I think we should be doing everything we can to meet the needs of the homeless, meet the needs of those who are impoverished, and make sure everyone has access to a job. And so that's what my commitment to you. I think in terms of organizing to ask churches to do more, that's what you can do as a member of a church, urge them to do more. What I can do federally is I can give federal money to not-for-profits that help poor people. So that's my role as the federal government, but I believe it's my role to fight for those who need our help. I believe that is the purpose and function of government. Thank you.
Hi, my question is about education, and it's sort of got two parts. One is, what will you do to protect public education in the United States from privatization? And the other part of it is, how will you change policy so that education isn't dominated by standardized testing, which also is kind of a privatization because there are companies making billions of dollars on testing and curriculum and professional development.
Thank you. So education is typically a state issue, not a federal issue, but there are ways the federal government can reach the goals that you're talking about. I start my view of education from early childhood education. I believe we should have universal pre-K, and we should actually make sure every young child has a chance to get early childhood education, because every $1 you put in early childhood education, you get $11 out in productivity for that child across their lifetime. And so it's a huge return on your investment. So that's step one. Step two, federally, we can work on a couple of things. I have a bunch of bills to enhance learning for everyone, particularly for those who don't get access to certain subjects, whether it's STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, for young girls and minorities who don't often get encouraged to go into those fields, but 8 out of the 9 of the fastest growing industries in the country require an education in STEM. So I have a number of bills to incentivize getting more access to STEM education for younger children, for primary school and for high school and for secondary school. I also believe an issue that is relevant for the public schools that I get to work on is hunger. I think we should have breakfast, lunch, and dinner programs in any community, in any city that needs them, because a kid who's hungry cannot learn. So that's a way we can send federal dollars to help our public schools thrive. And I get to do that work because I sit on the Agriculture Committee. I'm the first senator from New York to sit on that committee in 40 years. And so one of the battles I have over and over again is about funding food stamps. But I think we should make sure that we invest in public schools. I do not believe that we should privatize our public schools. I voted against Betsy DeVos specifically for that reason. And so I think the most important thing we can do on that issue is keep fighting for it, because our children are our future. The strength and well-being of our economy rests on the education we give our children. We also need to make college education affordable. And I think that all federal student loans should be refinanced at the going rate, which is about 4%. I would do it automatically. And that would put $15 billion right into the economy immediately, because I think student debt is one of the worst things that's happening in our communities to really harm our ability to start businesses, start families, and earn our way into the middle class. And so those are some of the issues that I focus on, but I agree with the premise that we should not be privatizing education, and that's why I oppose Betsy DeVos.
Your work inspires me and many my age. Every issue we care about flows directly through the ballot box and through the voting booth. So what can be done both to safeguard our elections from foreign interference in the future, as well as expanding and updating New York State's Byzantine and sort of anti-voter voting laws that we have now, so more people are involved in the process?
I share a concern about whether our elections will be protected, because President Trump has done nothing to protect our elections from future hacking. He doesn't stand up to the Russians. What he did in Helsinki was horrible. And not providing any accountability for the Russians who intentionally tried to undermine our free elections. And so I have a bill with Lindsey Graham that was to do the deep dive to figure out what are the 10 things we need to do to harden our infrastructure for the next election. We've been unable to get a vote on that, even though it's a good, strong, common sense, bipartisan bill. So now I think it's time to just move straight to the solution, and what the solution is we need basically a paper receipt of every vote in America, so it can be recounted, can be audited, and we should speak out about that and demand it, because it's really important that we know our elections are secure, and that worst case we can at least recount if we believe there's been meddling in any given election.
Thank you very much, Senator, for showing up and that we have the opportunity to address you. My question is about, I'd like to have a representational government rather than a government by the Electoral College. I feel that my vote is wasted here in New York because it's so strong democratic that a lot of our votes are just pointless because someone in Montana can overcome us. So that's one thing I'd like to say to you. The other thing is that the Republicans have been talking about nixing the Roe versus Wade which I certainly hope doesn't happen. But if that is possible, then is Citizens United possible to be knocked out as well?
Let me take the last question first. So, as I opened up with, I think money in politics is corrosive, and I think it's a huge problem. I think for the Citizens United decision to get decided the way it did, it took an ultra-leaning right court to get there, because they made two conclusions that were not foregone conclusions that I think were wrong. They said money speech, which I do not believe it is, and they said the corporations have the same free speech rights as individuals. I do not believe they do. And so I think, yes, in the future, if you had a different Supreme Court, you could eventually undermine Citizens United. And the quickest way to undermine Citizens United is just to change the law and actually write legislation that says money is not speech, and that corporations do not have the same free speech rights as individuals, and that we want publicly funded elections or some kind of transparency and accountability as an interim step. So those are things that I believe in, and that I would want to work very hard to increase transparency and accountability. I think disclosure is mandatory, should be mandatory, that at the end of any ad it has to say, hi, I'm Joe Donor and I paid for this ad, in the same way I say, I'm Kirsten Gillebrand and I approve this message. You have to have disclosure, one. But two, I think long term you really just have to push money out of politics, because it has such a negative effect, in my opinion. You have corporations spending millions, hundreds of millions of dollars in these elections running negative ads. One thing we know is when you run a negative ad, it depresses voter turnout. People get disgusted with the system and don't want to vote. That is horrible for our democracy. It also affects people who want to run. It's one of the reasons why a lot of women previously didn't run for office, because they couldn't stand the negative ads and the attacks. So I think it's a huge issue. I think that, what was the first part of your question?
The first question was about the Electoral College.
Yeah.
How do we get rid of that? I mean, how many times do the Democrats have to lose a presidential election to the Electoral College?
Yeah, I share your concerns about the Electoral College, and it's something I need to look into more. But I do feel it's distorting the outcome. I really believe one person, one vote makes sense, so.
All right.
I'm Wendy Brandis. I'm from Indivisible Upper East Side, and we have had the pleasure of meeting with your staff a lot, so thanks for making them available. They did tell us that you were turned away from inspecting a facility for immigrant children here in New York, and I'm wondering if you've gotten to, I know you went to Texas, but if you've gotten into the New York facilities, and if you are working with anyone on the state or city level to deal with why these children are being shipped here and what conditions they're being kept in.
Thank you. I am horrified by the Trump administration's policy towards people seeking asylum. I mean, absolutely horrified. It's against what the Statue of Liberty stands for. It's against our history as a country. We have always welcomed asylum seekers in our country. And what they are doing today, I think, is inhumane, and I think it's immoral. I was denied access to facilities in New York City. I was given the opportunity to visit a facility in Westchester called Children's Village. And this has been a facility that's been there for a very long time, and it's funded and run by not-for-profit, but funded by HHS. But what disturbed me about this facility is that these kids aren't free to leave, and they are monitored 24/7. There are chairs outside their bedrooms so that guards can guard them through the night. The bedrooms had no personal effects. It looked like it was a prison. The one thing that offended me the most is they had stuffed animals on every dresser. The tags were still on the stuffed animals. Those were not stuffed animals that those children were allowed to play with. And these weren't even young children. So it was the fakeness of it that just, as a mom, disturbed me so deeply. The other disturbing thing about this visit was the second these kids turn 18, they call ICE, and they deport them. Third thing that was disturbing about this place is that when they go into the local community, if they're allowed to go to a movie once a month or do something once a month, they're not allowed to speak to anybody. That is not right for children. That's why it's so immoral. So we need to do something about it, and we should be speaking up and speaking out and fighting back as hard as we possibly can. We need to speak out and fight back on the Trump administration on this very issue, because it is wrong.
Hi, my name is Ruth Walter, and I ran for office in 2017. You endorsed me. I ran in Westchester. Thank you so much, Senator. I didn't win this time, but I'm part of that. Get off your chair and get into politics. We are very fired up in Westchester to not only flip the House in 2018, but also to get a true blue state Senate. So I know that's not your. But what have you found to be the most effective way to get non-voters to the polls?
I think the most effective way to get a non-voter to the poll is to speak from your heart about why you care. You as an individual will have a greater ability to get someone you know and love to vote than any politician, than any ad, than any mailer ever could. And so I think this moment in our history is about your voice and your values and speaking out about what you believe in to those in your circle, no matter who they are. Maybe the lady that you see when you get your coffee in the morning, maybe the guy at the bagel counter, maybe the person behind the counter at your dry cleaner. You should really talk to everyone in your community. Are you voting? Do you know where your polling place is? Do you need to register to vote? And for young people, if you just turned 18, God bless you, please vote. We want you all to vote, because part of our democracy is getting everyday people voting every day. Like, it's really important that we take these elections as the deciding point of our future, because it is absolutely what will decide our future. And I also support the democratically elected state Senate.
The first, I'm a citizen for a year, so so I voted in the primaries. So I have a question about, I'm a scientist, and our job, you know, in New York there are many scientific institutions. Our job is to really try to find cures for diseases and really like do good for the whole community. So one of the things I would like to know is like if we can get to a point in which there is no politics in funding for research.
So one of the problems with the Trump administration is they keep underfunding and defunding scientific research, particularly the NIH.
The Republicans basically have Satan at the head of their party, and they're circling around him. And when something happens like, you know, sort of Al Franken's fall from grace, we just kind of let him go. So, and I'm very pro the Me Too movement, and you know, women are really sort of coming to the fore now, and it's terrific. But I wonder if we aren't painting everything with a very broad brush, and perhaps, I guess I'm just wondering what we can do to be maybe a little bit more supportive of each other as Democrats, and you know, think about due process and think about supporting everybody in the party and giving everybody sort of the benefit of the doubt. That's my question.
Thank you for your question. So my view on Senator Franken, he was entitled to as much due process as he wanted. Those were his decisions to make. What he was not entitled to was my silence. And he wasn't entitled to the silence of 30 colleagues who did not think it was okay. He had 8 credible allegations against him for groping, and I believe the women. And I have to say, it's not okay to grope a woman without her consent anywhere on her body at any time. And I couldn't be a good lawmaker because I've been, as you know, at the forefront of a lot of these issues about valuing women. Do we value women? That's why I've been fighting against the Department of Defense on whether they will prosecute cases of sexual assault and sexual harassment. It's why I've been working so hard against the Department of Education to make sure we can actually have standards on college campuses, so we can have accountability when there's rape and assault on a college campuses. It's why I work with Ted Cruz on writing the anti-harassment laws for Congress. And actually, our bill was passed unanimously as part of a larger bill. And so I could not be a good senator if I said nothing, because I got to the point where enough was enough. I could not be a good mother if I didn't say anything. I had 2 boys, and the conversation I was having with Theo was, "Mom, why are you being so mean to Al Franken?" And I had to say to Theo, "I understand, Theo. We like Al Franken. He's a nice man, but what he did is not okay. It's not okay for you. It's not okay for him. You may never touch a woman without her consent anywhere on her body, period." So that's it. And I know that's upsetting, but it's the truth. And I felt I had to say my view. To your original question about Democrats, I don't know how the Republican Party can look themselves in the face with an accused multiple harasser as President Trump, someone who's been accused of harassment and assault multiple times, credibly. I don't know how they can look themselves in the mirror and not speak out against it. I think it's outrageous. I will never be like them.
Hello. So the past few decades especially, immigration law has been combined, or immigration policy has been combined with crime law in general, making it when someone gets deported, it turns into a felony offense. And it makes it very hard for countries, especially countries where the majority of people are people of color, to seek asylum, because when people come here illegally and they get deported and they have these felony offenses based on the policies that we as a country are making, it makes it harder for them to seek asylum and get asylum, making it easier for other countries which have primarily white people to get asylum before they do. And so I just want to know how we as a people and you in the Senate can reverse these laws or do anything to make this better. Yeah, thank you.
Well, as I said earlier, I think this is one of the greatest failures of the Trump administration, the fact that they do not have a proper process for asylum seekers. And unfortunately, what they are doing is criminalizing coming to this country and seeking asylum. Unfortunately, that's exactly what ICE has done. They have become a deportation force. They are targeting immigrants at their green card applications. They are targeting immigrants, a man and a wife who went to Fort Drum to see their son-in-law who'd been 2 tours of duty abroad, and they detained them. They detained a pizza delivery man with an American wife and American kids. What they are doing is wrong. And so this administration needs to be held accountable for how they've actually changed immigration in this country. They just floated an idea where they're going to make legal immigration reduced and much more hard for people to come to this country. My basic view is this. Immigration is our strength. Our diversity is our strength. We are a country founded by immigrants. And so we should have a robust asylum process. We should be able to take families, welcome them. In our state, where we've taken communities of asylum seekers across the state, those communities have thrived. Not only they're entrepreneurial and innovative, but they help an economy grow. And so immigration is a strength, not a weakness. What the president is doing is harming America's defense, not making us stronger. It's hugely immoral and it's wrong. So I think we do have to fight back against what this administration is doing, what President Trump believes, and talk about what we believe as Americans, that our diversity is our strength.
All right, the next question is coming from 630 and 575. 630, 575.
Thank you for the privilege. My question is, what do you think are the chances that we're going to see you standing opposite Chief Justice John Roberts on January 20th, 2021?
Thank you for your question. I'm solely focused on running for my own re-election in 2018 in November, and I hope I win your vote. Very much. Thank you. I think everything that we should be focused on for all of us right now is 2018, because you have a chance to change the players list. And if we can change the players list in the House and Senate, Jerrold Nadler, who is right here, will be chair of the Judiciary Committee, which is going to make a huge difference for oversight and accountability over the Trump administration. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ethan Fertiel. I'm from Westchester. I really feel like STEM should be implemented more into the schools in where I live, Mount Vernon, because the taxes there are actually pretty high. So, and in my school, I don't really see much of a change with all this money going in to these different, to all these different groups and different things like that. And yeah, I really believe that STEM should be implemented a lot more into my school and other areas like this in New York.
Well, Ethan, your question was excellent, and some of your teachers are doing very well because you've asked the right question. I agree that we need to fund more STEM in our schools, because I know as a mom of 2 boys, what excites them is when they get to see things and do things. Hands-on learning, most educators will tell you, is the best way to make sure all kids can appreciate STEM education, and particularly for young girls and minority students who often aren't encouraged to go into STEM. So I have a couple of bills to help increase the number of kids who go into STEM. One is to do funding for teachers so that they can get more proficiency in science, technology, engineering, and math, so they can inspire more kids. I have another bill to encourage more hands-on learning so that you could learn how to build a rocket when you're in 3rd grade, or maybe build a robot when you're in 5th grade, so you actually get to see and do it. I also have a bill to increase the learning in high schools for SHOP. It's called the SHOP Act. So when you're doing home ec or whatever the equivalent is today, you should be learning how to do 3D printing, and you should learn how to do laser cutting and other skills that are really important for STEM fields, so you can get those good jobs that are higher paying because they require proficiency in those STEM subjects. So I have a couple of bills to get at your very issue. If we can win back the House and maybe flip the Senate, then we could actually get those bills voted on and funded so we get more money into our public schools to make a difference.
Okay, so here's the last 2 questions. I'm just a proud pastor because Ethan is a member of Riverside Church, but I'm just sorry. So our last 2 questions are coming from number 713 and 595. 713, 595.
I'm 713. Someone asked a question before about voter turnout, and I think the answer to that is people turn out when they feel that the individuals who are representing them are honest and principled and actually talk to issues that are of concern to them. And so the concern for me is that I don't hear in the Democratic Party any discussion about people of color. I don't hear any discussion about men, women, and children who are being killed by police. I am a mother, I am a grandmother, and I shouldn't have to be worried about every day when my child or my grandchildren leave the home to go out the door. The communities in Detroit, those children, they're also important, still have water that is consumed with lead. This past weekend in Chicago, there was a devastating tragedy over the weekend. I don't hear the Democratic Party talking about those children. I think it's really important to talk about immigrant children, but I don't hear the Democratic Party talking about us. And when you're expecting communities of color to turn out in November, unless I hear that you're going to be talking to me, I don't think it's reasonable for you to expect to see me.
So I believe that we need to fight for certainly all New Yorkers, and I think one of the things that the Black Lives Matter movement did was really put in very clear relief some of the issues that weren't being addressed. Certainly gun violence in our state and in our country has reached exponential proportions. One of the issues that concerns me the most is how many kids in our state, in our city, are killed every day because of stray gun bullets, because of gang violence, because of crime in their communities. And so we need to do far more to make sure that we get guns out of the hands of criminals, which is why I have an anti-trafficking bill, because 90% of the guns used in crimes in New York City are coming from out of state, and the majority of them are illegal guns. They're just sold out of the back of a truck directly to gang members. So I do think we have to do a lot about ending gun violence in our communities by restricting guns in the hands of criminals. I also think we need to make sure that we teach bias and reform our police departments. I think it's really important that our communities feel protected and feel safe by law enforcement and don't have to fear law enforcement. So I think it's very important that we continue to have that kind of training. But I think the economy is the #1 issue. And I think for communities of color, the most important issue that they need is a good paying job to provide for their kids and make sure their kids have the same opportunities that my kids have. And so the truth is when a mother has to tell her son that she has to be careful of law enforcement because that he might be treated differently than somebody else, that's wrong. It's wrong when a black person in our state, in our city, is 10 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession than a white person, even though the usage is the exact same, is wrong, which is why we need criminal justice reform. But you still need to focus on the jobs. And so the truth is that's why full employment is one of my goals. I believe that Coretta Scott King took this issue as a legacy from Martin Luther King Jr. because she knew it was right. She knew it was the moral thing to do. She knew that if you actually have a goal of full employment, not congratulate yourself at 4% unemployment, because 4% unemployment nationally still means that African American males in an inner city might have 10 or 15% unemployment. It still means young veterans coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan have a 20% unemployment rate. It still means that black-owned businesses are getting far less access to capital than white-owned businesses, that male-owned businesses are getting far more access to capital than female-owned businesses. So you've got to deal with the biases throughout the entire economy. And that's what institutional racism is about. And so if you don't take on the institutional racism that changes what kind of education kids are getting in different parts of our communities, that it doesn't change how many kids get access to early childhood education, if it doesn't change the quality of the air and the water in a place like Morningside Heights or in the Bronx further up, because of the way the highways were built 50 years ago to be a very harmful way, particularly for communities of color, it's a huge issue. And so I do agree that we should be speaking out on these issues, and I do. I do a lot on water quality and air quality because I sit on the Environment and Public Works Committee. It's something I feel very passionate about. I focus a lot on asthma rates in our inner cities because they're higher in the Bronx than they are, and in Harlem than they are in places of upstate New York because of the way the highways are done, and there's not enough trees and not enough parks, and historically they weren't built that way. And so I try to rectify those wrongs, and I really believe that every child in this state deserves access to clean air and clean water as a right, not a privilege. And so these should be our shared goals that we should fight for.
Hi, Ms. Gillebrand. I know I have to be quick. I met you in Flushing, Queens at the library last year, and I think it was meant to be for me to be in the church to have the last question. And I'm sorry if I'm emotional, but I have a grave problem, and it has to do with healthcare, and I have a problem that I think in this country, and not just because of my brother, I have a brother that has a mental illness. And people with mental illness are not getting the treatment and the care that they need. And I'm alone fighting for my brother, and I have no help. And right now he's living in deplorable conditions. And I was assaulted in front of my building for advocating for him to the landlord and beat up. They come through the window, they burglarize the house, they threaten to take our pets away, they won't do no repairs. No one will help me, and I can't find a mental health attorney except when he's in the hospital. I have to advocate for him and be his power of attorney. The program that pays his rent will not relocate him. I've been fighting for a whole year. I got an attorney and they didn't even respond to the demand letter. I have to get my brother out of there, and the program won't move him. And then I don't know where they're gonna put him. And they won't do nothing to help me. Nobody with the mental health system is helping me.
Well, I'm sorry. It's heartbreaking what you're going through. And I would be grateful if we could help you as part of my office work. We do constituent services every single day. Emily Arsenault sitting right in the front row, and she is the head of our whole New York City and state office. So I would be grateful if we could advocate on your behalf. I think we need a lot more funding for mental health, for support of individuals who need it. And I think we should be doing a lot more to deal with making sure that our public housing is livable and not laden with lead paint and insects and vermin. Like, you should have housing that you like and that is good for your brother and good for you. So I will fight for you individually, and if there's anyone here who has constituent service issues, that's why we're here. We brought our cards, we're here to serve you, and I'm just sorry that you have to go through this, and God bless your brother. Thank you. So I just want to recognize how many elected leaders are here, and I really want you to stand up, and if I've missed anybody, tell me.
As head of the FBI, covered up the role of the Saudis in 9/11. And you know that.
Yeah, and we should have access to that report.
Will you support the recent resolution from Senator Blumenthal calling for all the release of the documents pertaining to 9/11 and the role of the Saudis?
Yeah, I think I'm already on it, and I was on the previous legislation that did exactly that.
What about Robert Mueller intentionally covering up the role of the Saudis as head of the FBI?
I'll look into that.
Head of the FBI.
I will look into that.
Senator Bob Graham said that Robert Mueller.
I will look into it. I will look into it. Thank you for letting me know. I will look into that, and I was definitely among the people who were calling for that report to be made public, that made the statements about 9/11 and the Saudis. I will look into it. I promise. I will look into it. I promise. I got your message. I'm on it. I'm on it. I'll do it. I'll look into it. I promise. Okay, so can I just recognize the electeds here, please? Pretty please. Council members Levin, Rosenthal, Powers. Assembly members Inez Dickens, Linda Rosenthal, Al Taylor, and Deborah Glick. State Senator Brian Benjamin, thank you for being here. God bless you for your service. I'm very grateful for all that you do for our constituents, and I'm honored to serve with you. So if anybody wants a selfie, this is how you do it. You come over here, you give your purse or phone to somebody, and then you exit that way. But line up on this edge where the rope line is.